Mars 2120 is a new Metroidvania releasing on the Switch, which sees you investigating a colony on Mars where contact has been lost. You'll need to use your special abilities tied to elements to discover what's happened and find the secrets of Mars. But will the game be a saddening bore because you've played it 10 times or more, or will there be life on Mars? And if you get that reference, yes, you are as old and knowledgeable as me. Well, thank you to the publishing team for the review code, and now let's find out. So in terms of story then, it takes place in the 22nd century, where the first human colony on Mars has sent a distress signal to the UN, and you play as Sergeant Anna 13 Charlotte, who has been charged with investigating the colony to find out exactly what has happened. There isn't a huge amount of story, it must be said, quite disappointingly so for a Metroidvania. There's no real exposition, apart from some audio files that you can pick up, which do fill in some of the blanks. Gameplay wise, it is a Metroidvania, as I already said, and you'll need to investigate the colony, with there being certain areas that you can't access immediately, and you'll gain further powers as you go on that will allow you to go back to these areas and make your way further into the depths of the colony to find out exactly what's going on. You start off with a ranged weapon and a melee attack, and you also have an evasive roll move which you can activate by pressing A. You have a map that is in the top right hand corner of the screen, and you can press the minus button to make this larger, and it will fill in as you explore more of the colony. And in true Metroidvania fashion, there are a number of doors, each needing a particular weapon or skill in order to access them, and as I mentioned a minute ago, you'll pick these up as you go on. Now the weapons, or the abilities at least, are tied into elements, so the first one you'll pick up is an electric attack. This will be fused into your gun, but you'll pick up other ones as you go along, such as ice and fire, changing the way that you fire your weapon, with the ice one almost being like a shotgun and the fire being more like a flamethrower. But you can also pick up abilities that tie into these elements too. For example, you'll pick up an ability with the electric element that allows you to phase through electrical disturbances, power up or down certain machinery, or even travel through conduits to navigate large spaces. The way that you gain these is a bit odd, I must say. They're basically tied to a skill tree, and there's nothing strange about that. You'll gain experience by defeating enemies, and this does actually build up pretty quick. But the reason it builds up so quickly is because it's very rare that you'll get a chance to spend it. You see, you need to find the abilities strewn about the area, and once you've found the ability, you can then go to one of the save points, and from here you can access the skill tree to then purchase said ability. To be fair, key abilities such as a wall jump can be used straight away once found. It's the upgrades that you need to find and then put those points into. Personally though, I just feel it would have been better if the game had decided one between the two, either put points into a skill tree or find them scattered about. It seems a bit superfluous to do both. To be honest, that's my biggest problem with a lot of this game, is a lot of what's done just doesn't seem to have been done quite well enough. It's very middling, it does everything quite well, but it does a lot that just seems a bit odd. I did like the elemental powers, and I liked the way that these then lent themselves to further exploration, and I liked the way you could shift between them. Enemies will be immune to certain attacks or certain elements, weak to others, and of course you need to try and figure these out as you go along. And your melee attack is quite useful too, and you can get into quite a nice flow of combat when using that evasive role. It just never feels quite polished enough. For example, you'll defeat a boss, and rather than there being a moment like a cutscene where you'll contact back to base control and tell them of what you've just found, they then say that you may want to explore X region because it was the last known sighting of something, or there being a computer module nearby that you then log into and find out something, some revelation that moves you on. Instead, once you defeat a boss, your map comes up and it just tells you where to go next by way of an exclamation mark being plonked onto the map. It just lacks polish, it doesn't quite feel refined enough, it feels very by the numbers. In a field as crowded as the Metroidvania genre, especially on the Switch, you really do need to stand out, and this, again, is just where this game falls down. It doesn't really stand out in any one area. The controls are decent, probably the tightest part of the game, and the gameplay is up there as one of its strongest parts, and don't get me wrong, I always want the game's gameplay to be the best part of the game, but it's not as good as other Metroidvanias, and it does start to feel a little tedious after a while. Gameplay has some interesting ideas, and it is your standard Metroidvania fare. There's nothing inherently wrong with it, it's just done better elsewhere, I'm sorry to say. It gets 12 out of 20. Controls, as I mentioned, are actually quite tight, and probably the strongest aspect of the game. They get 15 out of 20. Now moving on to the visuals, and again this is where the game's going to fall down because it just doesn't look particularly polished. The character looks okay at distance, but any sort of close-up shot really does reveal a few flaws, especially in terms of hair. And whilst there were some nice moments, especially when using some parallax scrolling, such as the almost like Terminator-esque robots that you see in one particular part of the facility, a lot of it does look quite basic, and there were also quite a few stutters as the game went on, which did start to drag the performance down. Again, there were some nice moments. There was a boss, a big fire dragon, who would breathe fire towards the screen, and this looked quite decent. But again, things such as assets rendering in quite slowly just break the immersion, and there were also a couple of glitchy moments, nothing major. Just here, as you can see, my character is clearly standing on nothing at all, just levitating in the air. Adding into this, and probably the worst offender, were the load screens, which are not only frequent but also quite lengthy at times, and they are just everywhere. There are just too many. Audio wise, again, not inherently bad, and it does do its job, but there are just some moments where it doesn't do its job well enough. On the first boss, the music was just very uninspiring. It didn't get you going for what was happening on screen. It was quite low key, didn't seem to match the on-screen action. Other times it does, to be fair, but it's just a bit of a mixed bag. In terms of voice acting, the audio files do play, but there's nothing else. There's no real story. That's one of the big misses of this game. It doesn't really do anything to expand this world. You're on Mars, on a colony. Think of the opportunities that they had for story and world building. It just doesn't do it. It's just a shame, to be honest. The whole game just feels like a missed opportunity. Visuals are poor, I must say. They're definitely the worst part of the game, and the performance isn't hugely better. They get 8 out of 20. Audio is okay, and again probably one of the stronger points of the game, but being the stronger of what is quite a weak package doesn't mean it's particularly good. It gets 12 out of 20. Mars 2120 costs £17.99 and regional equivalents are on your screen now. Now again, in terms of what you're getting for your money, you're getting a decently sized adventure, I guess, in terms of Metroidvanias on the whole, and the gameplay, as I did mention, is one of the stronger elements. I did feel the game got better as it went on when you start getting into the flow and getting a few of the power-ups or different elements. But I do feel the pacing is a bit off. There was one boss, it's that fire boss I mentioned earlier actually, that went on forever. And not because it was difficult, not because I was dying, just because it took so long to whittle down the 2 health bars it had. Where the value falls down, of course, is in production values and that lack of polish. There are just so many Metroidvanias on the Switch, and they either offer better value for money in terms of their production values, or they're just cheaper to buy. Now, an obvious one to mention is Hollow Knight, because it's about £10. I wouldn't say that's a fair comparison, because this is much more of a traditional Metroidvania. A fairer comparison would be something like Time Spinner, another Metroidvania on the Switch, which is very good, really enjoyed that one, and it is a bit cheaper, and it's definitely more refined. This one just feels a bit shallow, it's just not quite there in any one area, and value gets 10 out of 20. To conclude, Mars 2120 isn't a bad game. I think it's important to say that. There are elements of it that aren't great and there are elements of it that are quite bad, but it does play a relatively decent game. Unfortunately though, it's not a good game either. It's very much an average game in a genre that is very strong, and it's not even going for a price that makes it competitive with those flaws in mind. If you love your Metroidvanias and you can find this on a deep sale, I would say there's enough here that you'll at least feel that your time wasn't wasted playing it, but that's not really the height of our ambition when we're playing games, is it? Let's be perfectly honest. Mars 2120 gets a SwitchUp score of 57%. Thank you everybody for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to leave a like if you did. Yeah, not a terrible game, but not a particularly great one either. It's very much in the middle, has some good ideas, but there are just so many better options. Don't forget, if you are looking for credit to pick up anything from the eShop, you can get your eShop cards at our website, switchup.gg, and doing so will get you 5% back in cash back. A quick thank you to our patrons and our channel members for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.